Hello, I'm Dr. Beech, and in this video I wanted to talk about what we consider good diet in Shaka Vansya Ayurveda. So diet is extremely important in terms of treating our patients, because if the diet's not good, the whole physiology has to adapt to that poor diet. And in doing so, it disturbs the delicate intelligence of the body. In other words, it kind of dumbs down. So if we're living off fast food or lots of frozen food, microwave foods, processed foods, those foods aren't natural. They don't contain all of nature's intelligence. And because of that, the intelligence of our gut and our liver, the blood, everything has to dumb down to meet that. Otherwise, the body would be rejecting just those kinds of foods all the time. So in Shaka Vansya Ayurveda, one of the main things that we focus on is telling our patients that the food has to be intelligent. And when I say intelligent, I mean that it has all the vibration of prana in the food, meaning the food is as fresh as possible. So we want to favor foods that are, fresh, like fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. Grains are old, but they maintain themselves. So do legumes. But as opposed to having frozen foods and processed foods, we want to have fresh food. And I explain this to my patients in terms of if I offered you a fresh peach and a canned peach, you would automatically take the fresh peach. And the reason for that is the life in you, the intelligence in your body, the prana in your body recognizes the intelligence of that fruit. The way that we recognize it is we think, well, it tastes better. It feels good when I eat it. It makes me tingle inside. And so that's the intelligence of the food matching with the intelligence of our body. With the other peach, with the canned, the frozen peach or canned peach, whatever it is, you eat it and you recognize it as a peach, but it doesn't have that same quality. It doesn't feel good the same way. You don't feel it all the way through your system like you do the fresh peach. Now, if you analyze the two ingredients, if you put them in a machine and you analyze them for their nutritional content, you'll find the nutritional content is exactly the same for both. They have the same carbohydrates, assuming no sugar's been added. They have the same carbohydrates, the same proteins, the same minerals, the same vitamins. That's all the same. But your machine says, I want the fresh peach rather than the canned peach. And that's because when you put them in a machine to analyze them, that machine is dead. It can't analyze life. It can't analyze intelligence. That's too subtle. And so it only looks at the ingredients, the actual physical molecules of ingredients. And that's the difference between fresh food and food that's been processed or frozen or even leftovers and that type of thing. So our first number one requirement is that try to have food as fresh as possible. Number two, avoid leftovers. We say that the food is either intelligent, dumb, or dead. When the food is dumb, it means that it's older than probably about 4 or 5 hours. It's starting to lose its life. You've cooked it and now it's been sitting around for a few hours and the life is oozing out of the food. That's called dumb food. Dead food is food that's gone more than 6 hours. You've refrigerated it, frozen it, whatever. And that food has no nature's intelligence. It's dead food at that point. That's why we have to keep it in the refrigerator or keep it frozen in order for it to still be edible. It still has all of the nutritional qualities in terms of the physical molecules, but the intelligence that structured that food in the first place is long gone. Another example, one of my patients once said, well, Dr. Beech, you can flash freeze a piece of fruit and then you can ship it across the country and reconstitute it, and it has the same nutritional content in it that it had when you flash froze it. And I said, you could flash freeze me and ship me across the country and reconstitute me, and all the nutritional content would still be there, but Doug wouldn't be there, right? And so that's the difference between the intelligent food and the dead food. So that's those points are very, very important. Then in terms of what kinds of foods to choose, We want to choose foods that have more soma. Excuse me. When we say soma, we mean the cooling, lunar, stabilizing energy. Now, we live in an age, this modern age is very high in Agni. And Agni means that there's a lot of that transformational heating energy from the sun. And it's affecting our bodies in ways that create a lot of inflammation. This is one of the reasons that we have so many inflammatory diseases today. So we're living in an age when there's too much Agni. We have too much stress, too many poisons in our food and in the environment. We're not keeping good routines. We're under a lot more pressure than we've ever been. And we're also exposed to a lot of EMF through all the devices that we use, which can also increase Agni. And so because of this, we need to have food that balances that. That means more soma. So somagenic foods are foods such as summer squashes. Summer squashes are the squashes that are white on the inside, like zucchini, patty pan squash. Yellow squash is probably the very best one. Then there's some Indian squashes like Loki squash and tori squash, snake gourd. All of those are summer squashes. You know it's a summer squash because it's white on the inside as opposed to orange on the inside. Now, by contrast, the winter squashes we want to avoid. Pumpkin, butternut squash, acorn squash, those kinds of squashes. They're very hard to cut. It takes a while to cook them. They digest okay in the stomach, but when they get into the microcirculatory channels, they can stick there. The residue can stick there and then create ama and amvisha if it sits there for a long time. And so that can create inflammation and disturb that channel. So avoid those hard to digest squashes. Have the easy, light, cooling squashes like summer squashes. And then green foods, green beans, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, all of the green vegetables, as well as carrots are good. Daikon radish is good. White daikon radish, red radish is good. You can have salads are fine, but not so much in the winter, have more in the summer. And if you eat salads, don't put raw vegetables in the salad unless you grate it. You can grate carrots, you can grate radishes, but don't have whole broccoli and whole cauliflower. Those hard vegetables need to be cooked because they don't digest well if they're raw. So those are vegetables. For fruits, have sweet, juicy fruits. Favor fruits that have more soma, which are sweet and juicy, and avoid the fruits that are more acidic, like citrus fruits, like sour orange and sour grapefruit. Now, it's okay if you can get a sweet orange. I live in Maryland, and so you buy an orange, you don't know if it's sweet until you buy it. If you're in Florida, then you can usually know that those oranges are going to be sweet. So in general, avoid the citrus fruits. But there's one citrus fruit that's really, really good for us because it's pro-alkaline. It increases our pH. It's actually a pH buffer, and that's called lime. Lime is an excellent citrus fruit. It's kind of God's gift for sour because most sour is channel clogging and increases Agni. But lime does the opposite. So you can squeeze lime on your food after you eat. Don't cook with it, but squeeze it on your vegetables or chicken or whatever after you eat. And lime is better than lemon in terms of it being more pro-alkaline than lemon is. It's more quick to buffer the pH. So lime is excellent. If you're making a salad dressing, one of the foods we tell you to avoid is vinegar because vinegar is so acidic. And so instead of making a vinaigrette with vinegar, make it with lime and olive oil rather than vinegar and olive oil. And there's a nice alternative that way. So that's it in terms of fruits. Mango, peaches, pears, plums, watermelon, all of those. And also berries are very high in antioxidants, so raspberry, blackberry, blueberries. Strawberries, if they're sweet, are fine, but a lot of times they're sour, so you have to be a little more careful with strawberries. Then in terms of protein, we recommend paneer is the most intelligent protein. Paneer is made with milk, and we have a video on our site here for how to make paneer. It's very easy to make. It's basically just a very nice, quick, easy milk cheese that you make, and then you can cook with it. That's a very intelligent protein. Yogurt is also an intelligent protein if it's homemade, fresh yogurt. But you can also have chicken, fish, turkey. We do tell you to avoid the red meats, however, because they're very aggravating to the liver, because they're heating to the liver. And then for grains, basmati rice, white basmati rice. Brown basmati rice a lot of people eat, but it's aggravating the pitta. So white basmati rice is better. Quinoa is one of our favorite grains because it's very high in protein. It's also high in magnesium and zinc. So that's an excellent one as well. Amaranth, barley, couscous, millet, those are all fine grains. And you can rotate your grains. Try not to have the same grains every day. Have different grains, just like you would vegetables and fruits. Don't have exactly the same thing every day. It's good to rotate and change those. In terms of oils, olive oil, a nice organic olive oil is very good. The only problem with olive oil is that it has a low burning point, and so it's not good to heat it up very much. You could saute lightly in it, but don't fry in olive oil. If you're going to deep fry something, sesame oil is better. It's very heat tolerant. And then the king of all the oils is prebiotic ghee. And prebiotic ghee is a very special type of ghee that we make. It's the traditional way of making ghee in India. Most people, when you buy ghee today, if you go to the health food store and you buy ghee, that's unsalted butter that's just been melted, and the solutes come out, the proteins and all that come out, and what you're left with is the pure fat. And that type of ghee in the ancient text says that it increases meda dhatu, it increases the fat tissue. It's difficult for the liver to digest that ghee. The prebiotic ghee is processed in a different way. We make it by taking heavy organic cream and then making that into yogurt. And then that yogurt we chill for about a day, and then we churn it into butter. Now that butter is full of probiotic. It's a probiotic butter. By doing that, by introducing the probiotic into the cream, it gives agni to the cream and balances the heaviness, that very heavy cooling soma. That soma needs a lot of agni to digest, so it's kind of pre-digesting that. Then we heat that probiotic butter into ghee. When we do that, it kills the bacteria. But the these probiotics are cannibals. They eat each other up. So what's left over is actually the food for the probiotics, and that's why it's called a prebiotic ghee. It means that it feeds the probiotics in the gut. So it's very nourishing for the probiotics. That ghee is very easy for the liver to digest. The liver can just eat that ghee without creating high cholesterol, without oxidizing the cholesterol. And it's very good for the brain. It's very similar to the fat of the brain, so it's excellent for the brain as well. So that ghee is that type of oil, that prebiotic ghee is the preferred oil in Shaka Vansya Ayurveda. So those are your oils to use. So in continuation, foods to avoid in Shaka Vansya Ayurveda, we start with what we call the nightshades. The deadly nightshades, they're actually called. The nightshades are a class of plants that have poisons in them. They're called anines. Anines mean poisons. Every plant has poisons in it, but we have enzymes that can negate those poisons, but we don't have enzymes for these. The deadly nightshades are potato, tomato, eggplant, and bell pepper. And those poisons can attach to the chondrocytes, the cartilaginous cells in the joints, and then sit there, and then the immune system can attack those and like an autoimmune disease. So we want to avoid those foods. And that's hard on most people because we're all accustomed to eating, especially tomato and potato. There is one substitute that you can eat for potatoes called taro root. Taro root's a very small root vegetable. It has little stripes on it and roots growing out of it, so it looks a little hairy. It's kind of an odd looking thing. But you just peel that out and it's white on the inside, and you can cook it like French fries or boil it. You can cook it any way that you make a potato. And that's very good. And it's also in the class of foods that we call binders. because it's a little sticky. It binds the toxins sitting in the colon. And so it's very good to use if we're doing any kind of detox program that way. The other binders are okra is a binder. Okra is a very good vegetable, full of soma. It's also a prebiotic. It helps to feed the probiotics in the gut. And arrowroot flour and tapioca pearls. They're all used as binders. So we use them a lot, especially if the patient is detoxing or if we feel that they're resorbing toxins back through the gut. So the nightshades, try to avoid as much as you can. They can create arthritis over time, and they're also clogging to the vibratory channels, the nadis as well. Another food to avoid would be banana. Bananas, if you eat bananas if you're in a tropical country, eating bananas is fine because those bananas have been ripened in the sun. But here in the West, like I live in Maryland, they bring them in green and they ripen them in rooms that are refrigerated and gassed and under fluorescent lights. And it completely destroys the intelligence of the fruit. If you ever eat a banana in a tropical country, you'll know what I mean because they don't even taste the same. And so it makes them very heavy and difficult to digest. So avoid bananas. Avoid vinegar. Vinegar, as I said before, is very, very acidic, and it brings the pH extremely low. So instead of vinegar, however, you can have lime. Lime is excellent because it's a pH buffer, as we talked about. And then there's the legumes, the beans. And beans there's nothing wrong with beans inherently, but they're difficult to digest unless you have a really strong digestive fire. So Charaka Samhita gives us license to apply the principles of Ayurveda for the time that we live in. If we were living in an agrarian society and we were very active, our digestive fires would be a lot stronger, and then we could tolerate the very tightly compressed proteins that are in beans. But these days, because we're living mostly in a sedentary lifestyle, we're sitting at computers all day mostly, and because of that, our digestive fires are weaker, and we're unable to break down those proteins efficiently that are in beans. That's why they give a lot of people gas. That's why you have to, if you don't use a pressure cooker, you have to soak them overnight just to soften them up enough to cook them in a reasonable amount of time. And so the beans are very difficult to digest. And so that's black beans, white beans, pinto beans, soybeans, chickpeas. All of those are difficult to digest, and we suggest you avoid them. In place of those, have very easy to digest legumes and lentils, like the little tiny red lentil that you can get in the health food stores, or in the Indian store. It's called masoor dal. Little tiny red lentil cooks in about 10 minutes, very easy to digest. It's a little heating, so if you're Pitta constitution, you might want to have more of the split mung bean dal. That's the green mung bean that they make sprouts out of. They split it. The little green shell falls off of it, and they're yellow inside. And that dal is very calming to vata, and it's not as heating to pitta. So that's also a good one too. So split mung bean, masoor, little tiny French lentils are good. And then if you eat Indian food, or if you eat Indian vegetables or legumes, there's a type of chickpea you can eat called kala chana. Kala means black, chana means chickpea. And you go to the Indian store and you ask for kala chana. They look like a chickpea, a little smaller than the white chickpea, and they're brown. They're not really black. They're more of a dark brown color. And those chickpeas you can digest easily. So those are good legumes that you can eat. And then avoiding onion and garlic. Now the reason we say this in Shaka Vansya Ayurveda, we put a lot of emphasis on the gut and probiotics. And the reason for that is the gut is called the brain of the brain in Ayurveda. So 5,000 years ago, they understood the significance of the gut in terms of its connection to the brain. And I find this very interesting because in chiropractic school, when we studied embryology, they explained to us that the gut is called the enteric nervous system. Enteric means gut. And the reason they use that word is because it derives from the same embryological tissue that the brain and the nervous system derive from. So they actually have the same embryological source in terms of tissue. So the gut is responsible for the production of thousands of neurotransmitters. 90% of our serotonin is made in the gut. That makes us feel calm and happy. Some dopamine is actually made in the gut, as well as a lot of other neurotransmitters. 80% of our white blood cells live in the gut, which means that the gut is extremely important for our immune system. And the way that we maintain the health of the gut is to maintain the health of the probiotics, the healthy, friendly bacteria. Vulgaris, bifidus, and lactobacillus are the three main strands of bacteria. And they act as, they're called yoginis in Ayurveda, and they act as mediators, because what they do is, first of all, they keep the bad bugs that live there, the E. coli, C. diff, H. pylori, all those bad bacteria and organisms. They keep them at bay, keep them from inflaming the gut and ruining the whole intelligence of the digestive system there. They keep them at bay, but they also act as a biological filter. They keep out the undigested proteins and allergens and toxins from getting into the bloodstream. So they act as that biological filter. When they're depleted or not present, we develop something called leaky gut syndrome or permeable bowel. Doesn't mean you have holes in the gut, but it means that that biological filter isn't working properly. And so the integrity of the probiotics is extremely important. And when they're not there, it's the root of so many different diseases, because all of this unwanted material gets into the bloodstream and then can cause all kinds of havoc in the system. So how does this play into onion and garlic? Onion and garlic are high in sulfur. And being high in sulfur, they're an antibiotic. So eating them every day is like trying to punch a hole in a bucket and then trying to fill the bucket with a hole in it, because we're eating something that's killing the probiotics, even though we may be trying to culture the probiotics in our system. And in terms of probiotics, we recommend homemade yogurt is the best. Homemade yogurt is the best because the bacteria are most viable. If you buy the yogurt in the store, the bacteria basically died off. The Charka Samhita, the ancient text, says that if the bacteria are viable, then the yogurt will be sour, sweet, like a milky sweet taste, and astringent. Kind of makes you smack your lips a little bit. It's dry. And it says, then conversely, it says if the bacteria have died off, then the yogurt's just sour, which is what it is when we buy it in the grocery store, just sour. So it means most of the bacteria have died off. They die off in about 24, 36 hours. You know, a lot of them are gone. It's still enough to spark a flame. You can use it as a starter maybe for yogurt, but it's not enough to really therapeutically enhance the integrity of the gut. So for that, we need fresh homemade yogurt, which is much lighter, easier to digest, and tastes a heck of a lot better than the yogurt in the store. Not hard to make. We have a video here on our website that explains and shows you how to make it. It takes maybe 5-10 minutes of your time, and then you put it in the oven or a yogurt maker and leave it overnight, and you've got yogurt. It's very simple to do. The alternative to that is a product that we call Triniv Trio by a company called Natron. And Triniv Trio we've checked many different kinds of probiotic companies, and a lot of them are just selling junk. So this one we know is a viable one. The only problem with that is that it does take a little longer to culture the gut to accept that probiotic, so that the probiotic can thrive in the lining of the gut. So we have to do some other tricks, like use Prakriti cream and prebiotic drops and ginger and different things that we do to enhance those probiotics that are in the capsule, make them more intelligent. But other than that, that's fine to use as well. What you can do if you're lactose intolerant, some people say, well, I can't have milk and I can't have yogurt because I'm lactose intolerant. And that means that you're not making enough lactase enzyme to actually digest the sugar that's in the milk and in the yogurt. But if you take the homemade yogurt, first of all, that's easier to digest just by nature of it being lighter. But also you can make something called a lassi. So with a lassi, that's a yogurt drink, and you can take about maybe a tablespoon of yogurt to about 8 ounces of water, add a little bit of our cooling soma salt, a pinch or two of toasted cumin seed. You can just take some whole cumin seed and toast it in a pan. When it's a little bit toasted, take it off, cool it, keep it in a glass jar, and then you can just use that anytime you need it. Just put a pinch or two in to taste. A little bit of cilantro. If you like, you can add some fresh ginger and a little bit of green chili. Is also balancing to the heaviness of the yogurt. And then blend all that up into a drink, and then just have like a bite and a sip, and a bite and a sip, and a bite and a sip, like that. That way, you're mixing the yogurt with the food. Same way if you're just eating fresh yogurt, have it on your plate and then eat it with the food at lunchtime. So you mix it in with the rice or your vegetable or whatever, and eat it together with that. That way it mixes with the food. That's the most natural way of getting the probiotic in the system. Now, so probiotic is extremely important, and that's why the main reason why we don't recommend onion and garlic. There are some little bit more deeper vibrational reasons. The onion and garlic have neurotoxins in them, and they tend to disconnect the heart from the mind, or as we say in Ayurveda, they close the heart lotus. We'll talk more about the heart lotus in another video. And then one last thing I wanted to mention. So we talked about vegetables, fruits, grains, oils, proteins, foods to avoid. I think I did mention winter squashes as foods to avoid. And then one other thing that I didn't mention, however, is something called green protein. Green protein, we have a whole video on green protein, and in the video I explain the science behind it. But I want to mention it here because green protein is the most alkalizing recipe that we have. Vijay Mishra made this recipe many years ago and found that it works so well because it disrupts the whole vicious cycle of oxidation of proteins that occurs in our system. If our system becomes acidic, then when we eat the proteins, they become oxidized in the liver. And that oxidation of the proteins creates more acidity, so it becomes a vicious cycle. And the green protein disrupts that cycle just by the very nature of the way that it works. It's the most pro-alkaline recipe that we have. So I highly recommend eating that 2 or 3 times a week. It's very easy to make. You get the hang of it. You can make it in just a few minutes, and it tastes wonderful. So I highly recommend eating that. Another thing is make sure that you're eating breakfast early in the morning. A lot of my patients come in, they're skipping breakfast or they're not eating breakfast till 8, 9 o'clock. We're going to have another video on nature's clock about the daily routine and how important it is to get up early in the morning. But you have to eat something first thing. So what we recommend is a stewed apple or stewed pear. This stewed fruit is very light. It's not heavy. It doesn't weigh you down like it would if you ate something heavier. You can have a heavier breakfast later. But first thing in the morning, have stewed apple or stewed pear. Just take a pear or apple, cut it up, put it in just a little bit of water with 3 or 4 whole cloves, not clove powder, but whole cloves, and just boil the water out and eat that first thing. What that does is it neutralizes the acid in the stomach. Now, you may not be feeling hungry, but you're making acid as of about 5:36 in the morning. And that acid then, if you're not eating anything, goes into the gut, and then that disrupts the whole probiotics because they don't live in an acidic environment. It lowers the pH of the colon. Then it gets absorbed into the bloodstream, goes to the liver, stimulates the liver, becomes even more acidic, and then it can be released into the bloodstream and go anywhere. And then it can create headaches, it can do all kinds of have all sorts of inflammatory effects. So eating first thing in the morning is very important. Having snacks during the day, anytime you feel a little hungry, eat a little something. Like here while I'm recording, I have a little bowl of walnuts and raisins here that I munch on between videos, just if I'm a little bit hungry, because you don't want to skip or delay meals. When you do that, you're stimulating the liver, and when the liver gets stimulated, it dilates and releases acidic toxins into the blood, and that sends the whole system into a more acidic state, inflamed state. So avoid those things. Eating on time, eating first thing in the morning, having lunch as your main meal every day between 12 and 1, and dinner between 6 and 7 or 5 o'clock, something of that nature, and then having snacks in between. That's the routine for eating. So I hope this video gives you a little bit of an insight into the Shaka Vansya approach to diet. Thank you.